Coming up on this episode of BRM TV, you've seen me build them in the magazine, but now I'm building them on camera. New tree packs from the Model Tree Shop. Plus, Phil enjoys assembling new container kits from ScaleModelScenery, and in the extras menu I catch up with Michael Russell as we take a closer look at a selection of his recent magazine projects. But first, this month's magazine has a distinct 1970s flavour in the shape of scorbiton. And if BR Blue Diesels are your thing, this layout is sure to please, something that caught our eye at the recent Spalding show, Portchullin.
I'm Mark Tatlow, and I'm the owner and builder of this layout. This layout is called Portchullin, which for those of you without the gift of the Gaelic, you need to say port and then who and chew at the same time. So Portchullin, right from the back of the throat. The layout is based on the line from Inverness to Kyle of Lochaush, now known as the Kyle line, but its real name is the line to Skye. The layout is built on a 90-degree curve. A little bit of the reasoning for that is that the line at the extreme end of the Kyle line is in fact very tortuous as it clings to the side of the loch. So sharp curves and in fact various gradients are very much a feature of the line. But I did it on a 90-degree curve because I wanted it to be a bit different. The vistas are very different from a straight layout that many other people have done. It makes it more interesting to view, it makes it more interesting to operate, it makes it a right pain to transport and store because all the boards are very odd shape. Although the layout is imaginary but on a real line, nearly all of the buildings are based on real buildings. The station buildings is based on Aberfeldy, the signal boxes and the up shelter are based on Killiecrankie. The hotel there is in fact a station master's house from Killiecrankie, and the Button Ben, as they're called, is from near Kyle of Lochaush. So the layout is built in 4mm to the foot scale, but it's in P4 gauge. So it's the more accurate end of 4mm modelling. All of the track work is hand-built. Whilst most of the locos in stock are ready to run, they've had replacement wheels and sometimes replacement bogies. And then the good stock in particular, and some of the coaching stock is kit-built. The cuttings are cut through rock as the prototype. The rock features are formed of cork bark, but cork bark has a lot of open pores. So before it got painted and finalised, I used car body filler and pushed it in with fingers and thumbs to take away the crevices and the holes, which made it look rather more realistic, but still keep the texture of the rock face. And if you do go up to the line, do keep your head in the window because the rocks really are there and they really are close. Even though the layout's now about 8 years since it's finished, the back scene has been left totally neutral. In truth, that's because I've slightly chickened out in confronting it, but having left it totally white, it doesn't detract from everything else around the layout. I've also taken the policy of trying to present the layout quite carefully. So we've got the proscenium arch, which is in fact masking the lights. We always make sure that the valance and below the layout is screened with this cloth so that the viewer's eye is taken to the subject. And in fact, one of the most startling places that it's been exhibited was a drama hall where everything around the hall was painted black, and literally you walked into the room and you saw nothing but the window of light of the layout, and that was theatre at its best. I chose 1974 because that's when I was first taken there by my father. My father, who also loves railways and loves the Highland Railways, dragged me up to see the line to Kyle of Lochaush when I was but an 8-year-old, because it was under threat of closure, as it had been for quite a long time, and we really did think that we were going to see the line for one last time, or my first time. Fortunately, the railway got a reprieve, which is why it's still here now, and it's still well worth going to see if you are ever up into the north of Scotland.
If you're interested in seeing more of Mark Tatlow's projects and layouts, take a look at his blog at www.highlandmiscellany.com. Okay, so today I thought I'd talk about trees. Now, often you'll see model railways have got trees on them of all different natures and different types, sizes and heights, particularly if you're modelling in different scales and gauges. But take the average tree, for instance. I'll say the average tree. This is like your typical sort of basic standard tree if you're starting off in model railways. And whilst it might, serve its purpose, it's green, it looks like a tree and you can plant it easily on your layout. It's not overly ambitious and doesn't really represent some of the very tall type of sort of pines that you can see in the wilderness in Scotland or Wales, for instance, if you wanted to model that sort of area. Now, it just so happens that a couple of months ago I came across a product I hadn't really seen before, and this was stocked by the Model Tree Shop. It's actually made in the US, and it's called, it's from a manufacturer called Coastman's. These are trees that are made specifically for railway modelers or diorama enthusiasts. This is its variety pack from its fir trees. You get 7 in total, all of different sizes in there. We'll get into the bag in a second. But the Model Tree Shop stocks the entire range from Coastman's. So let's get this open. Okay, so inside the bag, you get this little block which is designed to support the trunk of your tree when you're making it. But this is what I'm actually particularly interested in. These are real wood. These are made in Oregon, and they're really just turned on a little machine with a large sand conveyor belt which runs underneath, and then you get this really nice fine tapered point to the tops of your trees, which is brilliant because when you think about reusing twigs and things like that from your garden, very rarely you'll get that taper from, say, a centimetre in thickness at the bottom right down to about 3 millimetres at the top in such a short distance. There you go, that's how the trunks are made. We've got some little sort of stub twigs that come out of the side, or alternatively you've got a range of little twigs here. Now, this is the green matting. I'm not going to open it up just yet because it's quite messy, but this is what you tease out and apply over the top of your twigs with a little bit of glue. So the last bit, of course, are the instructions. So I'm going to have a quick read of these and let's catch up in a bit. Okay, so having read the instructions, the procedure is actually very simple to do. They recommend gluing this little standing block to support the tree when you're building it to a cardboard base. I'm not going to do that because I don't think I'm going to build one that's that big to start off with. So these are the little mounting pins that you get. It's just a bit of wood, and I've chopped the bottom off there, into which you'll insert it into there. So let's just get a little bit of glue to start off with. This is probably the glue I'm going to use throughout the build. It's Rocket Hot from Deluxe Materials, and it is a very, very runny super glue, which means that it's almost pretty much instant drying. That goes into there like so, just to support that, and you can see that all of the bases of these trunks are pre-drilled. So that's great because it just means that we can insert it straight on top of the mounting pin there, pushing it down into place, and hey presto, your trunk is supported. But over here, if we just take a look here, I've got a selection of different pin vices which are set up with the different size drill bits that I'm probably going to need to use throughout the build. And this is because for each one of these little twigs that we're going to insert into this trunk, we're going to need to pre-drill out a little hole. So just taking off with this one here, so I think let's give this one here a try to fit. So what tends to happen with these trees is they grow in large areas of forest, and they're all fighting for the light. So you don't get that many branches in the lower parts of the tree, and if you do, they tend to be little sort of short stubby ones that have broken off over time. Let's just get started with a pin vise and drill a small hole to begin with. There we are, one hole drilled out. Plenty of opportunity on the end there to break off the little bits of branches, so I'm going to go in with the tweezers, and that looks about right to me. Perhaps even just turn it a little bit 90 degrees there. So it's important when you're installing these that your lateral branches, which are these ones that stick out here, do so at 90 degrees so you get that fanning, which is typical of these sorts of trees. Let's apply a little bit of super glue on the end, and then into place we go. So that's one into place. Yeah, let's try this one just down here somewhere. So this is going to be the larger drill bit. Let's go with this one here. Let's just start drilling here. I was going to wiggle it around a bit just to get a little bit wider drill size than the drill bit I'm using. And we can just test that again. And if it's too small, we can always upsize, but as you can see, that's around about the right size we want. So a little bit of glue on that. So you get the idea. This is basically repetitive work now all the way up to the top of the tree, working away from some of the slightly wider ones, sort of midway up, to the thinner ones at the top, and then the odd little small twiggy one at the bottom there. So I'm just going to crack on with this, and we'll catch up in a bit and see how it's looking. Okay, so there we go. That is, well, majority of the twigs in place, I think, on this on the trunk, and of course there's plenty more to go out for the rest of them. Now I've parted a little bit in a different direction from the instructions, which recommend that you slide this material, just tease it out with your hands, put it down over the trunk, and then glue these branches in individually over the top, just to bring out sort of the dead twigs and branches of the trunk. But I'm going to do it slightly differently. I mean, if you want, you could leave this as a dead tree. That's perfectly modelled as it is there. You could leave that on your layout, or perhaps even enhance it a little bit with some paints. For example, these, the acrylics from Life Colour. This is the white wood set, and you could sort of bring out some of the different tones in the trunk there. Perhaps paint some a slightly lighter shade, ones that have died back, for instance, a long time ago and have changed colour. However, I'm going to have a go at using this. It's foliage mat, and you can see there's plenty of it to go at. This is a bit like a coarse compressed mat of material. I think it's natural materials, and over which they've put some foam, and it's glued into place, and it's actually quite tough and strong. So all you need to do is tear a little bit off like so. Now it does get a bit messy at this stage, so recommend you put something down on a table if you're working in the kitchen. And you can just tease out these areas of clump foliage until you've sort of achieved a certain amount that you're quite happy with, perhaps something like that. We don't want it too coarse or too dense. I'm going to place these between the branches with a little bit of glue just to fix them into place. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to use the same glue as I did before, and well, we'll see how it looks. Okay, so a few minutes later, and hey presto, we've got a little bit more foliage on the tree. Now, one of the things that I found when teasing out the foliage is that you've really got to make sure that most of your strands of foliage are in the same direction, which can be a little bit tricky because the matted sheet has them in all sorts of different directions with the strands there. So just a bit of teasing out to get them pointing the same way. And you can see now we've built up a bit of a skeletal structure there onto which we can start adding some foliage. Now inside the kit you get two colours of foliage. They're in these little sealed plastic bags. One there which is a little bit of a darker sort of foliage for, I guess, if you're inside a woodland and they're not exposed to as much light, most of your needles will be that sort of colour. But for the top of the tree, and more vibrant trees where, for instance, they're getting a lot of sunlight and they've got fresh needles on them, you're probably going to want to look at a colour like that. So I'm going to mix up the two here, I think. Because it's a tree that I'm not looking to have in sort of rude health, it gives a little bit more detail and structure, having a few dead twigs and branches, I think, on it. I'm not going to overdo it as an effect, but to get it to stick, I'm just going to use some standard spray mounts. Now, I recommend you do this outside, but for the purposes of filming, we're in a studio here, so we're not going to linger. But it works in the same principle as hairspray, really, where you can just give it a good shake, and we're just going to mist the entire tree all the way up and try not to blast too much of the foliage off in the process, and then we're just going to go over and sprinkle on some of the flock. So let's get started. Okay, so you can see straight away the tree's now changed colour. One of the things that you mustn't do though, of course, because we've applied spray mount to the entire tree, is get this all over the trunk. So I'm just going to work from the top downwards, being careful not to go anywhere near that trunk, and then fingers crossed we should have something that looks a bit like a tree. Okay, so that's one of the colours applied. I'm just going to apply a little bit more glue over the top of this and just try and layer some of those colours so that we get a slightly denser foliage in the areas where we have it. This green is quite a bit lighter, as you can see, so I don't want to apply too much of this. We might actually have more of this towards the top of the tree than the bottom. So there you go, one little fir tree complete. I think just to complete it, I'll break the top there to represent something that's splintered off with the weather. So if you'd like to get your hands on one of these packs from Coastman's, available from the Model Tree Shop, you'll find all of the details on their website. You'll find it on screen below. And this isn't just the only pack that they stock. There's a whole different variety of ones made by the manufacturer, all of which of course are available from the Model Tree Shop. So this one is suitable for 00 gauge. You've got the various trunks between 6 and 11 inches in height. But I know which one I'd rather have compared to these two. With this one, the basic one on the right, I think you'll agree, they're great little kits to make.
Today, we're talking about the device that has revolutionised goods transport in the UK and around the world, and that is the exciting intermodal container. These metal boxes are the goods wagons of their day. Back in the steam era, of course, we'd be shunting goods wagons around and manually loading things on and off them. Nowadays, none of that happens. All our model railways turn up from China in big metal boxes. Now, these have been around quite a long while. Indeed, containerization's been around quite a long while, but the very classic steel box has been developed since 1968, when the standards were first laid down, and they're absolutely everywhere. So much so that they're not only used for delivering things, they're now used for storage, and they turn up in lots and lots of locations. So how do we go about modelling one? The easiest way, of course, of modelling one of these metal boxes is quite simply to go to your favourite model railway retailer and buy some plastic ones ready to use, and they'll be decorated and they'll be lovely, and that'll be great. But to be honest, there's quite a lot of fun in making these things, and so I'm going to be using a laser cut kit from ScaleModelScenery. It's a kit that's available because it's produced by laser and done in CAD. It's available in several different scales. I'm going to build the 4mm version, but there is also a 2mm version should you be modelling in that scale, or you just fancy a challenge with something really tiny to make. I must admit, this was quite fun to do, but boy was it fiddly. So we'll stick with the 4mm version. You actually get two of these in the kit, and they're available in various different lengths. The lengths are laid down by the appropriate authorities, and so they are all nice and standard. That's how this whole system works. In the kit, you get the parts cut out on laser board. Now, Justin won't tell me what laser board is, but it isn't cardboard. It is a sort of cardboard, but it's a very hard cardboard. It's a really lovely material to cut, and presumably that's why they use it on the laser cutters. You get a map showing you what all the bits are. That's quite important because these things, all the bits do look very, very similar, and a nice photographic set of instructions. In theory, you can't really go very far wrong. First stage is, I've got two kits flopping around here. Let's just take a sharp knife, and I will say a sharp knife is essential. I'm using a Swan Morton scalpel here. This is one with a retractable blade. I like that because it protects the blade when it's banging around on my workbench amongst all the other tools. It stops me hopefully accidentally stabbing myself too often. But I also quite like it because it gives me a big chunky thing to grip hold of when I'm working. And I find it more comfortable in the hand this way. Okay, now the kit itself is cut out of the laser board, and what you've got is you've got most of the cut made, and this cutting line is amazingly only 0.1 of a millimetre wide, and there are little tabs that you can see that just allow you to hold, that you cut through, and those hold the bits into the etch, as we call it. I think etch is probably the wrong way, the fret, as we would call it. If you want to see where they are, just hold the thing up to a light, and they'll be really, really obvious. To release the parts, all you do is you just run the blade along, and this is a good reason for using a sharp blade. Keep your fingers back, and you'll eventually hit one of the tabs. I can just feel it as the blade goes through it. Run the blade along there, and there we are. Part A, which the instructions tell me has to be released first, and then quickly part B. I believe these are a side and an end. First thing to do what we call a dry fit. Just make sure when there's with no glue involved, make sure that the bits go together. The tabs and slots should line up nice and neatly, and certainly you can see that they line up there. Which brings us on to glue. You are going to have to glue this thing together, and really for me there are three options. There's standard woodworking PVA, that will work perfectly well. If you're really old school actually, not only will PVA work well, balsa glue will actually work well. If you're a little nervous about it, then Yoo-hoo or an all-purpose glue will allow you a lot more wiggle time moving things around. It'll take longer to dry, and so you'll actually have to sit there holding things for that bit longer. I'm going to use Deluxe Materials Rocket Card Glue. That does tend to be my glue of choice when I'm working with card, and sometimes with small bits of wood as well. It is very runny though, so what I do is I make a little pool on the corner of the modelling board, put the parts together like thus, put a screwdriver in the end, and just run this along the inside of the joint. Now the glue is so runny that it will wick its way into the joint itself, and hopefully that will go off pretty quickly and allow me to crack on and get the kit made. I'll carry on working. We'll take you on to the finishing touches. Stage one complete. The glue's drying quite quickly, so I can crack on now and do the detailing on the outside. It's an important point to pay attention at this stage and make sure you get the right bits out, because you've got two sides, a top, a bottom. This is the top, it's got the thinner bars on top. Just make sure it lines up nice and neatly so that all the edges are flush, but the tabs are just sticking over the edge, and then glue it in place. It's not a big structural joint, don't need to put lashings of glue on there. I just put a little bit along the edges there, because if I'm honest, once you've glued it in place, it's probably not going to come off. So, right, back to the magic of TV, and I'll stick all the other bits on. And there we have it, one container. There's only one detail left to add, and that is the locking bars on the doors. Now, these are fiddly. They're very fiddly in Engage. They're not quite so fiddly in 4mm, but thankfully the designer has realised they're fiddly and that will probably break some, and provided 2 sets. This is really where you do want to identify where those nibs are. They are actually quite sensibly not anywhere near the detail area, so you can cut down the side and then just poke them through. Yeah, cutting the locking bars out can be a bit tricky. Just work very carefully around them. Look at making sure you get all the nibs, and eventually when you run your knife up and down, like all fine parts from laser cut kits, they will eventually sort of jump out at you. There we go. Now, as you can see, these are sort of less than 1 millimetre wide, and they are made of a sort of cardboardy material. And this is definitely an area where you might want to consider using the Yoo-hoo, or indeed actually canopy glue or some very clear drying glue, because we have to line these up on the ends of the container, and you probably can't see that, but there are a couple of little indications in the lines showing the edges of the doors that show where the locking bars are supposed to be. First stage, make sure you know which way is up now, because the handles should be at the bottom. This is the top, it's got the finer etch. That's the bottom, it's got the coarser stuff. And then now I'm going to dip them in the glue and carefully line them up. The thinnest part should be on the door opening line, and you get a few seconds wiggle room with this. Again, not going to be structural, and once you paint this thing, they will be stuck in place because you'll put loads of paint around it. But there we are. Not quite got that on straight, but I'll shove it around a little bit. But there we are, a pair of locking bars on the end. And I'll just I'll finish this one up in a moment, but if you compare it with the Engage one, you can just see how different in size they are. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, my layout hasn't really got space for a container port, because indeed container ports are absolutely massive areas. They are the shunting yards of the modern day. But as I said, these things turn up all over the place. And so I've made a little diorama. That's a 20-foot long container I'm building. And there are also earlier ones which are 10 foot, and there are also 40-foot versions. They're basically standard units. And so I've built this little diorama, not with the containers in use for shipping things around, but actually in use for storage. So I built my little scene here, a bit of fencing, and a couple of storage containers. I've opened the door on one of them by cutting out the end door and replacing the inner backing a little bit. I've only put it ajar because you don't want to see the inside, because there's no corrugation, so it would look a bit odd. But here we are, a little builder's yard, a little scrap scene, or it could be absolutely anything. And a couple of containers, quick coat of Humbrol enamel, a dry brush with a slightly lighter version of that, just to make sure that the edges and all the details stand out, and then a wash of some sort of dark brown paint. One or two people may look at it and say, well, what happens? Some of the joints perhaps aren't going to be quite so perfect. If I've got the joints wrong, is there a problem? Amazingly, no, there isn't, because this stuff is quite hard. If you use a relatively soft filler, something like Deluxe's Perfect Plastic Putty, which I find very, very useful, it's got about the consistency of slightly thick toothpaste and actually looks about the same colour, but don't brush your teeth in it. And apply small areas to the joints if you want to hide them, and then using a sanding stick, this sort of thing here, you can actually smooth away on this cardboard, and it will take a fair amount of sanding and abuse. And this does generally seem to be the case with laser cut products. They will take a little bit of smoothing with a mild abrasive as well. So, you know, if it's not perfect, all is not lost. Anyway, there we have it. A quick tour of the ISO storage container that has revolutionised freight transport around the world, and hopefully a few ideas about how you can use them on your layout.
Next month, we hit the East Coast Main Line on an epic tour of Little Bytham, our layout of the month, plus we've plenty of projects to keep you busy this winter season. So, until then, happy modelling. Okay, well, welcome to the studio. I'm joined with Michael Russell, a friendly, familiar face that you'll note from the magazine on a regular basis now. And he's brought in with him a few projects that he's been working on. Now, you'll have seen these in the pages of the magazine, but that's just that. On the magazine itself, in the pages, you can't actually see it for yourself, turn it around, handle it sort of thing. And it's the first time that I've actually seen these, so I'm quite excited today. So thanks for bringing them in. So let's kick off first with your salmon wagons.
Yeah, this first one here is the earlier variant with the plate frames for the bogies. It's a Cambrian kit and very nice kit to build. It's straightforward. A few little things to watch out for in the article, but yeah, a nice kit to build.
I thought I'd give Michael a bit of a challenge with these two, really, because I was trying to come up with something that's a bit, I don't know, left field, a little bit different. These are a little bit different because you've built one in the earlier guise and then one with a later ASF bogie guise, and that was really to sort of give something for everyone, because this is one of the wagons that I'm surprised has never been produced ready to run. It's still only possible through a kit or scratch build.
That's right. They were very long-lived wagons, still around now. So.
Yeah. So this one, tell us about the difference between the two wagons there, other than the bogies.
Yeah, there's a few differences on it. For example, the brake handles are different. That's 5-spoke wheels. That's 4, and this has got the steps. The obvious one is the bogies, as you say, and yeah, the loads are held down a different way. This is using chains, and this is using these straps. So
they were modified quite a bit throughout their lives, and that's something that modellers have always got to be careful on, is when did the changes occur and what other changes happened. And you mentioned things like the wheels. I mean, were the different wheels included within the kit, or is that something you've had to source from elsewhere, the different wheel?
Yeah, I got the wheels from elsewhere. That's right, yeah. But they had the same wheels for both wagons.
Now, I believe you've got an interest in JB Sports.
Oh, yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, I needed to model the straps here on this wagon, and I was searching through my newspaper pile and I came across a JB Sport flyer, which had exactly the right shade of blue that I wanted, so that's where that's come from.
It's the most use I think either of us have ever had from...
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So, no, I mean, it looks brilliant, it's really convincing, and the strapping, as you took it out of the box, it actually holds them in place quite well. So, yeah, 2 salmon wagons. Of course, that one's got the chains on it, so nicely weathered, and of course, you know, with the extra detail. But moving on, this is the latest commission that I tasked him with. Tell us about this.
Yeah, this is a Bachmann wagon, and we've basically turned it into an MXA lobster. Nice build again. The only thing that's a little bit complicated about it is reducing the height of the wagon, which involves a lot of sanding.
So what, you literally sanded it by hand, or did you use a belt sander, or?
Well, if I had a lathe with a flat surface, you know, with a disc that's spinning around, I'd have probably done it on that at a slow speed. I did it, you know, flat on the desk, and it takes a while. You've got to be patient and take it slowly. You get carried away, that's when you tend to get uneven amount taken off.
So how much plastic are we talking about removing there on the surface?
Yeah, probably 3 or 4 millimetres.
That's quite a bit
Yeah.
So this is, for those of you at home that aren't familiar, is a BDA, of course carried steel and all sorts of rail around the country for many years, and recently DB Schenker have been transforming them into these bogie box carriers for ballast, spoil, moving, you know, aggregates around the network. So this is something that we haven't seen done before within the pages of a magazine, at least. I thought it'd be a great project to get, you know, to see how it turns out, and I've had to admit, you know, you've done a great job of it. Are there any things you'd change next time?
Well, like most models, none of us are perfect. I did actually make a slight mistake on this one, but
Modelling's the arch of botchery, though, isn't it?
So we'll tell you about these things so you don't repeat those mistakes the same as we did. So on this wagon I left the buffers on, and they actually end up being clipped, and of course they're not on the prototype. That's why they're missing off that end. So yeah, I've highlighted that in the article. Make sure you take your buffers off before you sand it down.
But I mean, you could add those later on with a bit of glue.
Oh yeah,
They'd be fine. I mean, they're not sprung or anything, are they? So I can notice some detail extra on the chassis and the underframe there at this end. What have you done there? Have you added a bit of extra plasticard to?
Well, the details on the buffer are actually the backman parts, which you can fit yourself. They come with the model. I've actually taken some material off the frame there, between the sole bars and the buffer stock, because that's very obvious on the prototype. And that's just about removing some material, and it does make the wagon look a lot better, because it's surprising from the normal viewing angle on the model railway how that feature stands out.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of extra work, but I think it's well worth doing.
So it looks like you've sprayed it up. What did you use for that?
Yeah, it's Humbrol enamel. I can't remember the exact number, but it does say in the article what it is. No, I used my spray gun.
Okay.
Yeah, for that.
And transfer-wise, what have you gone down? Are those Railtech?
Yeah, these are Railtech transfers here. I believe the one on the sole bars is from Fox, and I've done some hand lettering as well with a cocktail stick and white paint.
Well, great projects, and of course if you want to add some variety into your rakes of wagons, something that you don't see on the circuit, or perhaps, you know, with some of your mates, have a go at converting one of Bachmann's BDAs into your own lobster. So yeah, great project there. But this has to be the ultimate in consuming man hours. Tell us how many hours it took to convert this 31.
Well, I didn't log them all, but I estimate it at between maybe 30 and 40 hours. Yeah, but to get the finish, it's well worth taking the time and trouble.
Really well. I remember somebody posting on a Facebook page asking, is it the real thing? You know, copying his mate in, take a look at this, this is why I do British modelling. But I mean, it's testament to the quality of your craftsmanship. How many different parts have you added to the model? Just sort of walk us through what you've added onto the model.
Yeah, okay. One of the major improvements you can do, again, because of normal viewing angles, it really stands out, is the fan arrangement here. And Extreme Etchings do a fantastic fan kit, which you can see there.
So this is a Hornby Class 31, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the railroad model, which was originally made by Lima, and it's got a very good body shape, so it's a great place to start from.
Good, really good. They nailed it on the body shape, didn't they? And I mean, that was originally moulded, wasn't it? The fan cowling, but you've opened all of that up, and yeah. I mean, the sides you've added handrails.
Yeah,
all the way around.
The handrails have been added, which are just brass rod. The cab steps here are from a kit as well. It's quite a delicate one to fold up. But again, there's full instructions in the article, make it easier for you to do that so you can get it right first time. There's some parts that I've made that you could buy off the shelf, like the high intensity headlight. You could just buy that off the shelf. I made it from plasticard. Saves you a little bit of time. One of the biggest improvements is the glazing.
Right.
And I have, on previous diesels, cut all the individual panes out myself. put it in half
Been there,
laborious.
done that, yeah. Takes ages.
Yeah.
And matching them up so that they fit in perfectly. So this is laser glazed by Shortplan,
Yes,
isn't it?
that's
It's just,
right.
You know, it's designed to fit, makes it so much
It
easier.
does. It makes it an absolute breeze. It's a joy to use. Yeah.
And you've got some, I think the footsteps are those from Pete Harvey.
That's right. Yes.
So PH, is it
Designs.
PH Designs,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah. And then just to finish it off with the spray, you used Humbrol again on that, and transfers are from.
Well, they're a mixture of Fox and Railtech again.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it all scales beautifully, doesn't it? And of course, you've got the prototypical oil seeping from the engine room compartment on a 31. They were notorious for doing that, so all very authentic. I'm impressed. Yeah, hats off to you. So yes, there you go. There's a few of Michael's projects. I hope you've enjoyed seeing the guided tour of them. I'm sure there'll be plenty more to show us and coming up soon in the magazine, because this guy never stops modelling. So hats off to you, Michael. Thank you very much for bringing them in.